I'm Evelyn Jackson, 68, and until that night, I believed there was still a safe seat for me at my son's table. I arrived at Nathan's house on December 24th with my arms full gifts for Tyler and Emma and a $300 bottle of Bordeaux I'd been saving since Robert passed. The house glowed with golden lights, rosemary and lamb perfuming the air. Tyler, already taller than me, wrapped me in a clumsy teenage hug. Emma looped her arms around my neck like she used to when she was little. For one bright minute, it felt like family. Then the minute ended. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. Rebecca greeted me with the kind of smile you use when you're measuring people, not welcoming them. Nathan's hello was mechanical eyes sliding past me to the table set for 8. We were 6. Expecting someone? I asked. My father, Rebecca said. William Bennett, 72. My oldest, quietest competitor in the city. When he arrived, Nathan transformed attentive, buoyant, almost boyish. He'd never looked at me that way in years. I took my usual place, the head of the table beside my son. It wasn't a throne. It was history. After Robert died, we moved holidays here, and that seat became the spot where I steadied everyone when grief made the room tilt. I was smoothing my napkin when Nathan's voice cut the air cleanly. Mom, I need you to get up. I laughed, small and confused. Why? That seat is for Mr. Bennett. He's the guest of honor. The room shrank. Nathan, I've always sat here, I said calmly. It's for my father-in-law. He repeated, eyes flat, calculating. Please don't make this difficult. Rebecca stared at her plate. The children went still. William hovered behind my chair, watching with the cool interest of a man who has seen leverage change hands. I'm not making anything difficult, I replied, keeping my voice even. I'm sitting where the matriarch of this family sits. That was when my son put his hands on my shoulders and pushed. At 68, you don't fall the way you did at 28. Tile is merciless. My hip slammed first, then my palm, then the rest of me. The sound was a single hard note, followed by the kind of silence that makes your blood sound loud. Emma gasped my name. Tyler took a step forward and froze. Rebecca covered her mouth. William did not move. But in his eyes, God help me, I saw satisfaction. Nathan's words dropped like ice. This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out. I rose without help. My bones shook. My voice did not. I took a side chair, the kind you give distant relatives and latecomers, and folded my napkin in my lap, as if dignity were fabric that could be ironed smooth. They served the lamb. Nathan poured William the wine I had brought. They talked markets and mergers as though I'd evaporated. I listened, and the room changed. The lights weren't warm. They were gold-plated. The aromas weren't comforting. They were cover. The head of the table wasn't a seat. It was a symbol, and symbols, when stolen, demand response. I excused myself to the restroom like any polite, invisible woman. I locked the door, looked into the mirror, and met a version of myself I hadn't needed in years. The woman who built an empire from a one-room office and a second-hand desk. My hands stopped shaking. My voice returned. I dialed my lawyer. Sarah, it's Evelyn. Tomorrow at 8, we revoke every authority Nathan holds. Powers of attorney, banking access, guarantees. All of it. And I surety find. A pause. On Christmas? on consequence. When I hung up, I smoothed my dress, lifted my chin, and walked back to the table. They didn't notice me sit. They would notice me in the morning. The seat he stole tonight was only wood and leather. The chair I was about to pull out from under him had 4 legs made of money, title, access, and name. And when it fell, he would learn what a real landing feels like. I sat at that table as if nothing had happened, my fork tracing circles in the untouched food. The laughter around me was sharp and hollow, every sound another reminder that I no longer belonged. Nathan's voice filled the room, smooth and eager, flattering William Bennett about business deals and opportunities. He used the same tone he once used with me when he wanted something. I had built his confidence, his career, his entire world. And now I was the guest he had shoved aside for a richer name. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I watched. When dinner ended, I quietly slipped my coat over my shoulders. No one offered to help. Not even Rebecca, who once called me Mom. I smiled faintly to myself. They believed I was defeated. They mistook silence for surrender. But in that silence, I was already rewriting everything. As I drove home through the frozen Chicago night, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. Robert used to call them ribbons of fortune. Tonight, they looked like bars on a cage. My hands tightened on the wheel. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was the founder, the architect, the woman who built Jackson Construction from concrete dust and sleepless years. Every account, every property, every signature they used, it all began with me. When I stepped into my empty house, the ticking clock sounded louder than ever. I poured myself a glass of the same Bordeaux Nathan had poured for William. The irony was bitter but fitting. At my desk, I opened the drawer where Robert's old fountain pen rested. I hadn't used it since his death. Tonight, I uncapped it. One signature at a time, I ended the illusion of my son's power. First, the letters to the banks. Revoke all co-signed guarantees. Cancel joint accounts. Then the memo to my CFO. Suspend Nathan's salary and benefits, effective immediately. Finally, a short note to Marcus, my trusted second in command. Remove Nathan's belongings from his office. His title ends tomorrow at 9 a.m. Leave him a single message. This office is not for you. I sealed each envelope carefully, wax pressing firm like justice itself. The house was still, but my mind roared with clarity. For years, I had mistaken generosity for love, compromise for peace. Tonight, I remembered that peace without respect is just submission in disguise. At midnight, I called Sarah again. She sounded startled. "Evelyn, you haven't slept?" "Not tonight," I said. "I'm rebuilding the company." When I finally lay down, I didn't dream of revenge or loss. I dreamed of equilibrium. The scales were balancing themselves, and as the first light of Christmas morning crept through the blinds, I whispered into the silence, "Merry Christmas, Nathan. Your mother just fired you." When the morning sun rose, I was already dressed in gray wool, calm and deliberate. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving a pale layer over the city, like a clean sheet over a corpse. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the quiet streets as the clock struck 8. Somewhere across town, my son was still asleep, believing the world was the same as it was yesterday. It wasn't. By 9, the calls began. My lawyer confirmed that the banks had frozen every joint account. My CFO texted. All access revoked. Marcus is in place. I replied with one word. Then I turned off my phone and waited. At 10:30, the inevitable came. The house phone rang with the force of panic. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Mom. Nathan's voice was ragged, unsteady. My card isn't working. My assistant says my emails are blocked. What's going on? I took a slow sip of coffee. I told you last night, Nathan. Actions have consequences. Round, round. And the goated. Are you serious? It's Christmas. You can't just. One. I already did. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with disbelief. Then came the explosion I had expected. You can't do this to me. The company, my projects, my house, my company, my projects. The house you live in was purchased under my name. Every deal you signed carried my guarantee. You've been playing with money that wasn't yours. He said nothing. I could hear his breathing quicken, the disbelief turning into fear. Then a door slammed somewhere in the background, and I knew he had left to confront Marcus. Later that afternoon, Marcus called me from the office. His tone was calm, professional. He came in yelling. I showed him the memo you signed. He read it twice and just stopped. Then he left, without another word. I nodded, though Marcus couldn't see me. Lock his office, change the codes. When I hung up, a strange quiet settled inside me. I wasn't proud, and I wasn't relieved. It felt more like surgery, the removal of something infected, necessary but painful. By evening, the news spread through the company. Some employees called to express support. Others whispered that I'd gone too far. But I didn't care. Let them whisper. They hadn't seen the way he pushed me. They hadn't seen the contempt in his eyes when he chose a seat over his mother. As the last light faded, I stood by the window and whispered to the city. He took my chair. I took his kingdom. I have to win May Manatee, win be this. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. The next morning, I didn't need to imagine the chaos. It came to me in numbers. 47 missed calls, 17 messages from the bank, 3 from Rebecca, and 1 long, shaking voicemail from Nathan. His voice cracked somewhere between anger and despair. Mom, they froze everything. My car's been repossessed. They're coming for the house. You can't just do this. Please call me back. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the window and watched the frost melt on the glass. Outside, people hurried to work, holding coffee cups, unaware that in one house across town, my son's world was burning to ashes. By noon, I received a call from Marcus. He showed up again, banged on the glass doors. Security had to escort him out. He kept shouting that you couldn't do this to him. I can, I said quietly. And I did. Then I closed my eyes and let the weight of that truth settle. For years, I had allowed him to live under my shadow-lavish cars, private schools for his children, a mansion paid for with my company's profits. He'd mistaken comfort for entitlement and love for weakness. Now, he was learning the cost of arrogance. At dusk, my driver brought an envelope to me. Inside was Nathan's keycard, snapped in two, and a short note written by Marcus. Office cleared. Title removed. Security footage archived. I placed the pieces of the keycard on my desk, next to Robert's old photograph. My late husband's eyes looked back at me, kind but firm, the way he used to be when we built everything from nothing. He needed to learn, Robert, I whispered. The hard way. That night, my doorbell rang. I knew before opening it that it would be him. He stood outside in the cold, hair disheveled, suit wrinkled, eyes red. Snow clung to his shoes. "Mom, I lost everything," he said, voice trembling. "You can't do this to your own son." I met his eyes. "You did it to yourself." He reached out, but I stepped back. "You pushed me once, Nathan. I'm only pushing back now, with truth." He stood there, speechless. I handed him an envelope, his termination letter, his last paycheck, and nothing more. "Go rebuild your life," I said softly, but not with my name. As he walked away, snow began to fall again, quiet, steady, erasing his footprints as quickly as he made them. It felt fitting. Tomorrow, there would be no trace of the man who once thought he could stand above his mother. The following days unfolded like a storm that refused to pass. Every newspaper in Chicago whispered the same headline: Jackson and Co. announces leadership change. Reporters camped outside my gates, hungry for gossip, calling it a corporate coup. I didn't answer a single question. Let them guess. Let the world think what it wanted. I hadn't stolen power, I had reclaimed it. Rebecca, however, did not take silence kindly. She called me 3 times in one morning, her voice rising with every word. "You humiliated him. Do you even care what people are saying?" "He's your son, Evelyn." I stayed calm. "He's also a man who tried to destroy what his father and I built. He can fix his own mess." You're heartless," she hissed. "No," I said, my tone colder than the air outside. "I just stopped letting my heart be used as collateral. 2 days later, I heard through mutual friends that she had taken the children and moved back in with her parents. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was the next piece of news. William Bennett, the same man who sat in my chair on Christmas Eve, had cut Nathan off completely. He refused to invest in his projects or even take his calls. His only comment to a colleague was brief and brutal: "A man who betrays his mother will betray anyone." When I heard that, I didn't smile. I only felt the echo of justice, quiet, precise, irreversible. By the end of the week, Nathan's house went on the market. Cars repossessed, credit lines closed. The empire of illusions had crumbled, leaving behind a man stripped bare of titles and pride. I expected anger from him, but none came. Instead, silence stretched between us, wide and heavy. He didn't call again. Perhaps he finally understood that every conversation has a cost, and his words had already bankrupted him. That Friday, I sat in my office, the real one, and looked out at the skyline Robert and I once dreamed of. Every tower, every light, had a story of sacrifice beneath it. I thought about my son and the boy he used to be, the one who brought me coffee in paper cups and promised he'd make me proud. Somewhere along the way, that boy had vanished under suits, money, and other people's approval. But I also knew something else. Rock bottom has a way of stripping people down to their true selves. And maybe, just maybe, the man he could still become was waiting there beneath the wreckage of his own making. Winter stretched on, long and cruel. Nathan vanished from the social pages and the business world alike. His name, once printed in glossy magazines beside mine, now carried a different weight: pity, whispered judgment, a cautionary tale over cocktails. Friends who once chased his attention suddenly forgot his number. The invitations stopped. The doors closed. Reputation, I realized, is faster to die than love. I didn't see him for months. But news travels through the quietest corridors. A former employee told Marcus that Nathan had been selling his suits one by one. He'd moved into a small rental on the south side, somewhere near an old industrial park. He was applying for jobs, none in management, none in construction. He couldn't bear the thought of people knowing who he was. Rebecca filed for divorce in March. The children stayed with her and William. I sent them gifts for Easter books, puzzles, and warm coats, but I signed the cards, Grandma E. I didn't want them caught in the crossfire of their parents' mistakes. Still, I couldn't help wondering what Nathan was eating. Whether he had heat in that tiny apartment, whether he still slept through the night, or woke up hearing the echo of his own voice saying, "Get out." I hated that I cared, but blood has a memory. One rainy evening, Sarah, my lawyer, called. "Evelyn." He reached out through a legal intermediary. "He wants to meet." I paused. Did he say why? No, but his tone was different. Humble. For the first time in months, my heart stirred not with softness, but with curiosity. "Tell him. I'll think about it." That night, I sat alone in the living room, the fire burning low. Robert's photo stood on the mantel beside a candle that had nearly burned down to the wick. I thought of all the years I'd spent teaching Nathan how to lead, how to stand tall, how to never bow. But perhaps I had forgotten to teach him the only lesson that mattered, that leadership without humility turns into tyranny. The next morning, I wrote a short letter and sealed it in a plain white envelope. It contained no money, no forgiveness, just one line. "When you've learned who you are without the things I gave you, come find me." Then I mailed it to his new address. I didn't know if he would ever answer, but for the first time since that Christmas night, I felt something close to peace, the kind that comes not from winning, but from letting silence finish the teaching. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted into muddy streets, and Chicago's skyline looked softer, almost forgiving. That's when I saw him again, not in person, but by chance. I was being driven downtown for a meeting when the car stopped at a red light. Across the street, I spotted a maintenance crew in neon vests cleaning the glass windows of a bank. Among them was a man standing on a ladder, wiping the same square of glass over and over. His shoulders were broader, but his movements slower, deliberate, careful. When he turned slightly, the light hit his face, and I saw him. Nathan. My breath caught. My son, who once drove a $90,000 car and dined with executives, was now scrubbing windows under a gray sky. For a moment, pride and sorrow wrestled inside me. I didn't tell the driver to move. I just watched. He didn't see me, and maybe it was better that way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing his hands, once manicured, now raw and red from labor. But I also saw something else focus. No arrogance, no charm, just quiet work. Perhaps humility had finally found its way into him, disguised as exhaustion. A week later, Marcus called. "You're not going to believe this, Evelyn." Nathan came to the site downtown, asked for day labor. Didn't use his last name. Said he just wanted to learn again from the ground up. I smiled faintly. "Did you hire him?" "Of course," Marcus said. "He works hard, doesn't complain." That night, I poured myself a glass of water instead of wine. I didn't know if what I felt was forgiveness yet, but it was close. Days turned into weeks. Marcus sent the occasional update. Nathan took no handouts, no favors. He rented a tiny apartment near the job site, worked double shifts, saved his paychecks. He even visited his children on weekends, bringing homemade sandwiches instead of gifts. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the boy I once raised, the one who had helped me paint walls when our first office opened. For the first time in years, I whispered a prayer before bed. Let him learn, Lord, not for me, but for himself. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Somewhere downtown, under that same spring sky, my son was rebuilding. Not an empire this time, but his soul. By summer, the city had changed its rhythm. The parks were green again, children ran through sprinklers, and life pulsed with the noise of renewal. Yet in my chest, a quiet ache remained an ache that sounded suspiciously like hope. One late afternoon, I left a meeting near Michigan Avenue. As I stepped out of the building, I noticed a man wiping down the glass doors of a cafe across the street. He was wearing the same neon vest, same cap pulled low. Something about the way he moved made me stop. Careful, intentional. I stood still, hidden behind the reflection of passing cars. When he lifted his head, sunlight fell across his face. It was Nathan. For a long moment, I couldn't move. He looked older, not in years, but in spirit. The sharpness had faded. The pride that once hardened his jaw was gone, replaced by quiet focus. He worked with the kind of dignity that only comes from losing everything. I saw him smile faintly at a coworker, hand over a towel, then return to scrubbing the window. He was content. I stayed there until he finished, unaware of me watching. When he stepped inside to clock out, I finally turned away. My driver asked if we were heading home. Yes, I said softly, but take the long way. That night, I sat alone on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea. The air was warm. The crickets sang softly, and yet my mind was miles away, standing in front of that cafe window. I thought about the first time Nathan ever helped me clean anything. He was 8 years old, holding a rag twice his size, wiping our store windows before opening day. We have to make it shine, Mom, he'd said. If it shines, people will come in. And it had. I realized then that what I'd seen today wasn't just my son working. It was him, finding his way back to who he used to be, one clean pane of glass at a time. Later that week, Marcus visited. He doesn't talk much about you, he said carefully, but he respects you, calls you the only person who ever told him the truth. I looked at Marcus for a long moment. Does he still work every day? Every single one. End. After he left, I went upstairs, opened the drawer of my desk, and found Robert's old watch, the one I'd once promised to give Nathan when he proved he could lead with honor. The engraving on the back read, "For the man who remembers where he came from." I closed the lid gently and whispered to the empty room. He's remembering now. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was understanding. And sometimes, that's the bridge. Forgiveness quietly walks across. Autumn came, and with it, a letter in handwriting I knew as well as my own. The envelope was plain, unremarkable, with no return address, only my name written carefully across the front. For a moment, I just stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might stir. Then, I broke the seal. Inside were 12 pages, written on lined notebook paper. No pretense, no legal tone, No defense, just Nathan's voice, raw and trembling across the lines. Mom, it began, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that for the first time in my life, I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. He told me about the first weeks after losing everything, how humiliation had stripped him bare, how he couldn't face the mirror or the people he once called friends. He wrote about nights when he ate canned soup and stared at the ceiling, wondering how a man who once had everything could end up with nothing but silence. But then he wrote about change. About the morning, he walked past a crew of workers and asked if they were hiring. How they laughed until he picked up a broom and started sweeping without being told. How, for the first time, his muscles ached not from stress, but from labor. That first paycheck, he wrote, was the smallest I ever earned, but the only one that felt real. He spoke of seeing me one afternoon, how he thought he'd imagined it. That flash of my car window catching the Sunday. You didn't stop, but it was enough. Knowing you were near made me want to keep going. When I finished reading, I found myself crying not out of sorrow, but something deeper. Pride, maybe. Or the quiet relief of a mother who finally saw her son standing again. Not as a businessman, but as a man. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote him back. My words were short, deliberate. Dear Nathan, there are lessons only pain can teach. You've learned them well. Keep walking, and don't look back. I am proud not of what you lost, but of what you've found. Love, Mom. I sealed the envelope and placed it by the door for the morning post. Then I stood by the window, watching the golden leaves scatter across the lawn. For the first time since that night, the memory of him pushing me no longer stung like a wound. It felt like a turning point, the violent shove that sent us both falling, but also forced us to find our balance again. Sometimes, I realized, love doesn't arrive softly. Sometimes it arrives through collapse, through loss, through the letter that finally says what words never could. Winter returned, quiet and clean, almost as if the city itself wanted to start over. By then, nearly a year had passed since that night, the night that changed everything. Nathan had found steady work again, not in an office, but as a project supervisor for one of our partner firms. He didn't ask me for the job. He earned it. Marcus told me that he came in early, left late, and treated every worker with the same respect he once reserved only for those above him. When Christmas approached, I received an invitation written in that same careful handwriting from the letter. Mom, the kids are hosting a small dinner. Rebecca agreed. It would mean a lot if you came. I hesitated for a long moment before replying. Then I wrote simply, I'll be there. That evening, when I arrived, the air smelled of pine and cinnamon. Emma opened the door first, wearing a red ribbon in her hair. Tyler followed, taller now, his voice deeper. And then, behind them, Nathan appeared. He looked peaceful. No designer suit, no mask of control. Just a man in a simple gray sweater, hands slightly trembling, but eyes clear. He didn't try to speak right away. Instead, he stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. The table was already set, 6 chairs this time, and one at the head left empty. My old place. Sit there, Mom, he said softly. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room blurred at the edges, the way it had the night he pushed me. But this time, it wasn't pain that filled me. It was grace. Slowly, I took my seat. He poured me a glass of wine and whispered, This time, it's yours. Dinner passed gently, filled with laughter that had been missing for far too long. When we finished, Nathan stood and raised his glass. "To second chances," he said, "and to the people who loved us enough to teach us what respect really means." Ospen. Our eyes met, and I nodded without words. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't erase what happened. It simply acknowledges that we both survived it and chose to become better. Later, as I was leaving, he walked me to the door. "Good night, Mom," he said, voice steady. I smiled. "Good night, Nathan." Outside, the snow began to fall, soft and steady, covering the world in quiet white. I looked back through the window and saw my son clearing the table, helping his children laugh over a crooked gingerbread house. The same hands that once pushed me were now building something far more fragile and far more lasting. As I stepped into the night, I whispered to the wind, "Dignity is not about being honored. It's about standing when the world forgets your worth." Denigram. And Wadi, and in that moment, I knew the truth every parent must one day learn. Sometimes love means letting them fall, so they can finally learn how to rise.